All right. Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. Happy first day of the second some quarter. All right. To start with, the first grade is already in the grade book for most of, actually for one person. Thank you, Raymond. You're about the only person who submitted that. So we're going to take 10 minutes. If you have not submitted that, and I just changed it was due today, and I changed the due date so that everybody doesn't get zero right off the top. But let me pull up share. Um, okay, we are going to go on to cell energy because that's what we're doing today. Yes, ma'am, you have a question, even though you spelled question wrong. What is your question? Does it have to do with the microscope? Don't worry about the quizzes. I decided to take that off. So I had wanted you to do all of them, but unlike the other one, which gives you a summary of the scores at the end, this one doesn't do that. So I would like for you to do it. But don't worry about that. Just right now, what I need from you is the worksheet. Okay, so on the worksheet again, your worksheet has letters. So what you're going to do is to click on all of um, that's wonderful. And actually, if you did, because I did take that, I modified the score. So if you did do one of the tests, add that in. I might add that as extra points. Add that in. If you took a quiz, I'll add it in as extra points. Eggnog so early. It's not New Year's. I've never known anybody not to drink eggnog in the middle of the year. That's interesting, but it's delicious. It's delicious. Do you make it yourself, the eggnog, Raymond? Or is it store bought? Because like I said, they normally eggnog is seasonal.
It's
Yeah.
store bought.
Okay, cool. All right. Enjoy. All right. So yes, I'm gonna give 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Like I said, the only person I had one person to turn in their worksheet. So we're gonna turn that in and then we're gonna move on to cell energy. So if you are done, you'd actually completed the worksheet and all you have to do is turn it in. This is where we need to be in Canvas, cell energy, cell energy. So we had been talking about macromolecules. We talked about the cell. Good morning, good morning. We talked about these parts of the cell. Now we're going to specifically talk about the mitochondria and the chloroplast. In fact, there's a diagram that you have to learn. So if you are, once you finish with the worksheet, and like I said, I'm giving 10 minutes because we do have to move on. But I did extend the due date to Friday, even though we don't have class on Friday. It is extended to Friday because this is something that should have already been done. So take the time to get that turned in. Again, you don't worry about the quizzes. You can take them if you like, but I am more concerned that you know the parts of the microscope and answer the questions. Unfortunately, we're not in the classroom where you would have a microscope lab. I do have a gizmo that will have you using the microscope later on, but for now, we just needed to know the parts of a microscope. Had a lot of emails asking me, why am I got a zero? It was set up again to do, actually, it was set up to do yesterday. And then because that was not the first day of this quarter, it did not show up in the grade book until today. So I changed the due date to Friday. It is now in the grade book as your first assignment. When you are done, and we are still missing somebody, please read Cell Energy Overview. And then we're going to go to um, we're going to start with what is cellular energy. So our unit this time is cellular energy, or energy on the cellular level. All right, I'm going to stop sharing, do attendance, and then I'll be back. You all get those worksheets submitted. And you all were good. Like I said, you all were the only class I didn't have to call nobody's mama and complain about grades missing. So please continue that spirit of excellence this semester. I do give time in class for the assignments to be done. So there really isn't a whole lot of reason why things should be late, except that you're not doing it in class. You're doing something else. And so if you're late from here on out, you're just late. I am not closing assignments like I did last semester. I'm closing them after a month. So the end of October, things that have been assigned this month, they'll show closed. Like October 31st, anything that I signed this month is closing on October 31st, or a month from whatever date it's been issued, then it's closing. There'll be a due date, so there'll definitely be a time when it's late. But I won't have to keep opening assignments for people to do who just didn't get caught up on, for whatever reason, did not complete the assignment on time. Okay, work on the worksheet. Like I said, folks, because of the format of that test is very different from the last one. It's 3 different tests and they don't give you a summary. So I don't want you to um, send me a screenshot of that anymore. So work on turning in the worksheet. It's more important that you have all the labels done correctly and answer those 6 questions. And again, when you're done, we're doing cell energy overview. That's wonderful. All right. Sarai, are you logged into the wrong class? I don't even think I'm going to see you on. Yep, you're the one. All right, 5 more minutes. Not, you might not be finished in the next 5 minutes, but in 5 minutes we are going to move on. Sarai, you're in the wrong class. I find that interesting because that class did not have to do the microscope. So what is she doing? Oh, and tomorrow, will all of you be taking the PSAT? Just kind of nod your head up and down. Okay. Thumbs up. Okay. All righty. Raymond, you said no? Not you? Okay. You might be the only one in class tomorrow. Okay. I'll be here. I will log in, but I think most of you will be missing in action. So good luck to you. Do your best. They do, you do need that information, and they do, colleges do use that information. So take it seriously. I mean, nationally, the scores have not been good in the past. They blame it all on COVID, but do your best to do your best. Yeah, it is. It has parts to it. Excuse me. Because you have the English part and the math part. So it's long enough that you have to take breaks. Hmm. Okay. Okay, you want to go back to the guide. You want, for number 3, you want objective lenses, and you want to go through, let me post some share. I'm sharing the right page. All right, Avenay, you're going to find this piece of information on the guide. Now, for those of you who haven't answered number 3 yet, that's where you're going to find that information. So I went back. If you look at, let me close this for a minute. All right, so I clicked on guide and I clicked on objective lenses because that's what the question is about. And I went to the second page. It says, what are the magnification capabilities of the objective lenses? So you see these numbers up at the top, those are the magnification. So it tells you the scanning one is the red lens, it's 4. And you're adding this lens, let me go back one. So actually, so these are the answers. They go with the yellow one, the blue one, and the white one. So you have your numbers up at the top that are identified with the lens. But you have to remember that this lens is attached to an optical lens, which also has a magnification. Oh, that's not what I want. Oh, yeah. All right, so the eyepiece has a typical lens capability of 10 by itself. So when it asks you what is the total magnification of each, that means it's going to be 10 times whatever these are up at the top. Okay? So there's 2 parts to that question. So you want to write each of these numbers at the top next to its appropriate one, and then do 10 times 10 to answer the second part of the question. That's the answer to number 4. And then the others, you just have to that is the answer to number 6. Hmm. It is not Saturday. I'll come back to that in a minute. 'Cause I do see that most of you are diligently trying to get this finished. We have two people who have submitted so far. And again, if you've already submitted your worksheet, please look at the overview for cell energy. All right, so if you're still working on that, keep working and just give ear to what's going on. So we are starting this quarter with cell energy. And again, energy in the cell the is taken up by this molecule right here, an ATP, and that stands for adenosine triphosphate. So it's an adenosine molecule with three phosphate molecules attached to it. And they are held together by little bonds. So when we draw pictures, we have a line that connects one thing to the next. That little line represents a bond. And in order to break the bond, it takes some energy. And when it's broken, it releases that energy. And that's how we get the energy that is required to do all of our activities. So, and everything it says up here, energy is required. No, let's just go on the next page. Um, when we talked about Miss Grin and we looked about the 7 things that you need, all living things must do, all living things must obtain energy. Just sitting there in the chair doing nothing. Your heart is beating, that requires energy. Your lungs are filling up with oxygen, that requires energy. You're blinking your eyes, that requires energy. Thinking, your neurons traveling, that requires energy. So you might think that you're not doing anything. And some of you have very little energy because you didn't provide yourself any fuel for the energy. And so we're going to talk about the fuel and how much energy you get from it. And energy is defined as the ability to do work. And work is defined as the ability to change or move matter against another force. So in other words, if the object isn't moving, it's not doing any work. Okay, when I was teaching physical science, I used to give the example of you trying to push a wall, and you're pushing as hard as you can, sweat's falling off your brow, and the wall's not moving. So it doesn't matter how much you sweat, you have done no work. You might have exerted energy, but you have done no work. So there is a difference between work and energy. Okay. All right. So we're going to be talking about energy. How do we make energy in the cell? And then we're still on a cellular level, so we will be talking about cell membranes and organelles, the chloroplast and the mitochondria to be specific. And then look at all of these lovely words that we are going to encounter. So we are going to talk about some cycles. The cellular respiration is a process. Okay, so we're going to talk about that process. All righty, so what we're going to do first is watch this video. Now, she's going to get real deep, but trust me, this is kind of an overview of what we're going to do, and then we're going to break it down as we go through.
Are you a morning person? One of us is, and one of us is definitely not. Mainly because when I wake up in the morning, it just takes a while for me to get my energy back. It takes a lot of time and coffee for that to happen for me. Cells really don't have that luxury. They are busy performing cell processes all the time. Active transport of many substances needed for their survival, for example. And the energy currency they need, specifically, is ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. It's a type of nucleic acid, actually, and it is action-packed with 3 phosphates. We have a video all about ATP and how it works as an energy currency. So where am I going with this? Well, cells have to make this ATP. It doesn't really matter what kind of cell you are. Prokaryote or eukaryote, you have to make ATP. The process for making that ATP can be different, however, depending on that type of cell. One way is called aerobic cellular respiration. Lots of organisms can do aerobic cellular respiration, but this video is specifically going to go into aerobic cellular respiration in eukaryotic cells. That means this video is talking about the process within cells that have membrane-bound organelles, such as a nucleus and mitochondria. Eukaryotic cells include the cells you'd find in protists, fungi, animals, and plants. The mitochondria, which can be found in most eukaryotic cells, are going to be kind of a big deal in this aerobic cellular respiration because some of the process occurs in the mitochondria. So let's get started. Remember, the major goal for any organism performing this is to make ATP. Okay, here's the overall look at the equation for aerobic cellular respiration. Remember that reactants, inputs, are on the left side of the arrow, and products, outputs, are on the right side of the arrow. This equation, by the way, looks remarkably similar to photosynthesis. Look at how the reactants and products are on different sides. While that doesn't mean they're simply opposites, it does show that they have substances in common.
All right, I'm going to pause this here because I want you to write these two equations down. So you want to write cellular respiration first, that's the one on the top, and then you want to write C6H12O6 plus 6O2 plus yields. All right, so that means we're making it. So what's going to happen in this chemical reaction is all of these elements, and then the word reactant. You need to learn that because the questions on tests will ask you, what are the reactants of photosynthesis? And how are they compared to the products? So we need to know what we mean by reactants and products. These are chemistry terms, but you need to know that we're going to do a little chemistry in this unit. All right, so reactants are the things that go into an equation. The products are the things that come out of the equation. And what we need to remember, you're going to learn this in chemistry also, is that with the law of conservation of matter and energy, we don't create anything, we don't destroy anything, we just rearrange. So everything that went into the equation just changes places, changes partners, and all of those same atoms are going to be on the product side of the equation, just in a different place. So while you're writing that down, we want to notice, like with glucose, you've got 6 carbons. So the way that they show that there are 6 carbons on the other side, they put a coefficient number in front, because the formula, we were first and foremost, we're interested in what is the formula. And then once we figure out the formula, then we have to say, well, how many molecules do we really have? Because we haven't lost anything, we haven't created anything. It's just a new substance. So we still have 6 carbons on this side. There's 12 hydrogens. Because of that 6 over there in front of the water, on the other side, we now have 12 hydrogens over there. Glucose has 6 oxygens, and the oxygen is diatomic, means it's O2. And there are 6 O2 molecules. So there's 12 oxygens there, plus the 6 from glucose. That's 18. So if we run over to the other side, we've got 6 with the carbon. Actually, we've got 12, because 6 times 2 is 12 with the carbon dioxide. And then we have 6 more with the water. So we still have 18 oxygen atoms. So now this is what we call a balanced equation. So when you get to chemistry, there you're going to have to practice balancing equations. But for our purposes, I just wanted you to know what those numbers represent. They represent how many molecules you have of each substance. What you need to remember is, what is glucose? Glucose is C6H12O6. Oxygen is O2. Carbon dioxide is CO2. Water is H2O. You need to remember all that. And for respiration, when we break all those glucose molecules up, it releases ATP, which is our energy. And she's going to talk about that. Then on the bottom, we have photosynthesis. So with photosynthesis, we start with carbon dioxide plus water that comes up through the roots. So the carbon dioxide from the air, the water from the roots, and our sunlight energy is our activator. Notice we don't have that up top, because photosynthesis is just in plants. And in the process of combining these elements or rearranging them, we make glucose and we release oxygen. Okay? All right, so we release carbon dioxide as a gas, we release water vapor as a gas, and we keep the ATP. And down here, we're keeping the glucose and releasing the oxygen. All right, I'm going to let her keep talking. Hopefully you had time to write those down.
Organisms make glucose. Notice how glucose is a product. But in cellular respiration, organisms break the glucose down to make ATP. Fun fact, you know how when a bean seed first germinates in the ground, it isn't able to do photosynthesis yet? Yeah, the germinating bean is relying on glucose that it has stored, and it's doing cellular respiration to break it down to make ATP so it can grow. Of course, once it starts to mature and develop leaves, it can do photosynthesis. It will be able to do both photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Plants make glucose in photosynthesis, and they break it down in cellular respiration. They can do both. But if you aren't photosynthetic, such as a human or an amoeba, you have to find a food source to get your glucose. You need glucose to get this process started, and we're going to assume that we're starting with one glucose molecule. Step 1, glycolysis. This step takes place in the cytoplasm, and this step does not require oxygen. It's considered anaerobic. In glycolysis, glucose, the sugar from the equation, is converted into a more usable form called pyruvate. Glycolysis usually takes a little ATP itself to start up. The net yield.
Pausing that to say, we are going to go into this. So this is kind of a quick overview, because she talks very fast, but we are going to talk about glycolysis and what all of this process, this is one of 2 processes that we're going to talk about.
From this step is approximately 2 pyruvate and 2 ATP molecules, and 2 NADH. What is NADH? NADH is a coenzyme, and it has the ability to transfer electrons, which will be very useful in making even more ATP later on. We'll get to that in a minute. Now an intermediate step occurs. The 2 pyruvate are transported by active transport into the mitochondria, specifically the mitochondrial matrix. In the mitochondria, pyruvate is oxidized. The 2 pyruvate are converted to 2-acetyl-CoA, which will be used by the next step. Carbon dioxide is released and 2 NADH are produced. Step 2, the Krebs cycle, also called the citric acid cycle, still in the mitochondrial matrix. The citric acid cycle is considered an aerobic process. While the cycle doesn't directly consume oxygen, some of the events in the cycle need oxygen to continue. To learn more about this intricate cycle where the 2-acetyl-CoA will enter, check out the further reading suggestions in the video details. Carbon dioxide is released. We also produce 2 ATP, 6 NADH, and 2 FADH. FADH is also a coenzyme, like NADH, and it will also assist in transferring electrons to make even more ATP. Step 3, the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis. This is just a beautiful thing, really. In eukaryotic cells, this is still in the mitochondria, and to be more specific, it's involving the inner mitochondrial membrane. We do require oxygen for this aerobic step. This is a very complex process, and we are greatly simplifying it by saying that electrons are transferred from the NADH and FADH to protein complexes in electron carriers. The electrons are used to generate a proton gradient, as protons are pumped across to the intermembrane space. All these protons being pumped out into this intermembrane space generates an electrical and chemical gradient. The thing is, if you remember from our cell transport video, ions, like the H+, don't easily travel across membranes directly without something to travel through. The protons can travel through an amazing enzyme called ATP synthase. If I could be any enzyme, I'd be ATP synthase because it has the ability to make ATP by adding a phosphate to ADP. ADP is a precursor to ATP. ADP has 2 phosphates, but if it obtains a 3rd phosphate, it becomes ATP. So, in chemiosmosis, the protons travel down their electrochemical gradient through a portion of the ATP synthase, powering it to make ATP, the ultimate goal. Oxygen is the final acceptor of the electrons. When oxygen combines with 2 hydrogens, you get H2O, water. If you remember from our equation, water is a listed product. Now, the electron transport chain in chemiosmosis step makes a lot more ATP compared to the other 2 previous steps. How much? So I've noticed in my years of teaching and the assortment of textbooks I've collected over the years, there are some different numbers in cellular respiration charts. In fact, you can even see them change a bit in different editions of the same book. And it's made me want to emphasize that it's important to not just memorize a number, because it really is more of a range. I want to focus less on the number of ATP made per glucose molecule because it depends on a lot of variables. One variable is the gradient we were talking about. How many protons were pumped across the mitochondrial membrane? You can see more variables discussed in the factual references, and those references have estimates ranging from 26 to 34 molecules of ATP per glucose molecule in the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis step alone. Then, if you add the other 2 steps, Krebs, otherwise known as the citric acid cycle, and glycolysis, you could estimate a range of anywhere between 30 to 38 net ATP molecules total per molecule of glucose. Again, to emphasize a range. Now, this was just one way of creating ATP. But like we had said at the beginning, all cells have to make ATP, but the way they do it can differ. If there's no oxygen available, some cells have the ability to perform a process known as fermentation. It's not as efficient, but it can still make ATP when there isn't oxygen. We have a video about that. We can't emphasize enough how important the process of making ATP is for cells. For example, cyanide, which is found in some rat poisons, can block a step in the electron transport chain, which would block ATP production. A poison that prevents ATP from being produced can be deadly. With the important role that mitochondria have in ATP production, there is also a demand for increased research on mitochondrial diseases. We are confident that the understanding of how to treat these diseases will continue to improve as more people like you ask questions. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
Okay. Navine, there wasn't a new assignment. Stop them. All right, we are in Canvas, so if you, there's not a new assignment, but the assignment was for you to read, look over the vocabulary. So in the vocabulary, she talked about a lot of these things, and Krebs cycle, electron transport. So we are going to go through each of these because it is a process. You have to learn the process. So this is where we are. We're in Canvas. Okay. And then just take the time to, so let's start up here. So again, I mentioned the Miss Grin, that energy is a characteristic of living things. You need it to be able to survive. And in the cell, our organelles that we need to worry about are the mitochondria, and in the plants, we need mitochondria and the chloroplast. So we're going to look at both of those structures in just a few minutes. So we need to, again, know what is energy. And on a cellular basis, the molecule that carries the energy is ATP. Okay, and again, it is carried or transferred by the fact that, all right, these are all the reasons why we need energy. Okay, growth and repair. We don't grow without energy. Damaged cells require energy. Natural death basically is when the cell stops being able to repair itself, and there are enough cells dying that you become non-functional as an organism. So organs start shutting down first, and then the organism shuts down because don't have the energy to repair yourself. Active transport, we talked about that, where the molecules have to get across the cell membrane. And in this case, the membrane that they were showing in the video is actually the membrane inside the mitochondria. So we're going to look at that membrane. One of the definitions of eukaryote is eukaryotes have membrane-bound organelles. So that means all the little organelles that we were talking about last one, they have membranes around them. So they function in a similar way that the cell membrane of the whole cell membrane functions. All right, and again, if things don't make more of their own kind, they cease to exist, but it takes energy. We are going to look at cellular division and how that requires energy. All right, so this is the picture I said you were going to have to learn. Okay, the flow of energy. So it is important that you know that the sun is the source of all energy. Oh, hold on, let me go back up here. We didn't finish. We did not finish. Okay. Says, how does the cell use ATP? And again, the molecule up at the top of the picture, let me make this a little bigger. All right, we're looking up here at the top. This is a molecule of ATP. So it's adenosine with a little sugar molecule attached to it and 3-phosphate. Those little green things are the phosphate. And you see that line in between each one? That's a bond. So what's going to happen is we keep breaking those bonds. And every time, if you notice the next step, you break a bond, it releases that little starburst of energy, and the phosphate goes and travels and it waits to be picked up on the other side. But in the meantime, it has created a temporary molecule called ADP. And then the ATP it gets recycled. So that's the thing that you have to remember. It's always recycled. It is continuously going from ATP to ADP. Then it picks the phosphate back up and becomes ATP again. And every time the cell needs some energy, it just keeps breaking off a phosphate molecule. Sometimes it breaks off two. So you end up with AMP, which is monophosphate. So ADP is diphosphate. And then triphosphate. So this is a cycle of providing energy. The ATP doesn't become part of the equation. Remember, we had our cellular respiration and photosynthesis. ATP is needed to do it, but it doesn't become part of it. Okay, so it provides the energy and then it moves on and waits till energy is needed again, picks up the phosphate and moves on. All right. When we looked at our macromolecules, we talked about our main, that's why carbohydrate is at the top, because you get fast energy by breaking down glucose. You can break down proteins to get energy, and you can break down lipids. In fact, lipids would be step two because you get lots and lots of energy because of those long fatty acid molecules. They have lots of bonds to break, so therefore you can get lots of energy out of a fat molecule. But the body will break down protein as a last resort to get energy. It will find a way to get energy by breaking down something. So those are your fuel sources for getting energy. And these are the different ways that we do. Bio is living things, and synthesis is when we're making stuff. Detoxification, we trying to get rid of the poisons, the germs, so spitting out things that you don't want in the cell, that takes energy. Creating heat, thermogenesis is generating heat energy. The ion transport that they showed you in the video, that requires energy, and for your muscles to move, for you to move, that requires energy. All righty. And last but not least, those the two equations that I told. So you do need to know those equations. You need to know that the sunlight is absorbed in plants. Animals can't do that. Only plants can absorb. So all the original energy on the planet comes from the sun, and it is transformed into chemical bonds that we can break down during cellular respiration. All right, so you all wrote those equations down. If you didn't, there they are. All right, back. So that brings us back down to this picture. All right, you're going to get a little quiz where you're going to have to label the parts of this diagram. So make sure you study it, pay attention, you know what's going on. So the sunlight energy, and this green thing tells you that that's the part that's in the plant. Okay, so the structure is called a chloroplast, but the chemical inside is called chlorophyll. So you do have to know the difference between a chloroplast and a chlorophyll. So chloroplast is the organelle, chlorophyll is inside the chloroplast, and it is the chemical that actually does the converting. Okay, makes the sugar molecules. All right, so after we leave the chloroplast, we now have sugar and oxygen. Now, when you see this on a quiz, it's going to be a fill in the blank kind of thing. So you need to remember. In fact, it's what do you call it? It's Nearpod, but you're going to see this picture. You're going to have to label it just like this. All right. When you break down the sugar and oxygen, like we said in the equation above, you're going to release or create ATP, which is going to go inside, and you have your process of respiration. Now you're in the mitochondria. And as I said in the video, remember that people don't think photosynthesis is for plants and cellular respiration is for animals. Plants do both, because once they make the food, then they have to grow and they have to have other activities going on inside the plant. They need energy too. Okay, so they have mitochondria in plant cells as well as the chloroplast. And so this is where you take that sugar, you combine it with oxygen, and all of that is happening inside the mitochondria. All right, and the sugar is converted to ATP. All right, then in the process of doing that, a little heat is lost. Okay, and it's lost to the environment, so it kind of warms up everything around it. So it's lost in the sense that it's not carried on to the next step, but it's not really lost because it is absorbed by the cell. Okay, so and then it produces the carbon dioxide and water, and it goes back to the plant and uses it all over again. So notice this is a cycle. Okay, and what you need to remember is the products, which are the sugar and the oxygen of one, become the reactants for the next one, and the reactants for photosynthesis become the products of photosynthesis. Okay, so study that, and then I'm going to let you do this matching activity in the time that's left, and also turn in your microscope if you haven't turned that in. All right, if I don't see you tomorrow, good luck and and because I won't see you again until next Tuesday. But between now and next Tuesday, please turn in your microscope activity. All right, so if you're already done with that, work on the matching activity. If you're not done with the microscope, do that first, turn that in, and then work on this. You don't. I will create so all you have to do with this is just answer the questions for yourself. So you're testing yourself right now. I will create a test um, when you come back. In fact, it's not a test, it's going to be the Nearpod. The Nearpod is going to ask you to label diagrams and fill in the blanks on things. So that's what you'll do when you come back. But for now, you're just reading and testing yourself. There's nothing else to submit today except that microscope activity. And as always, when you're finished with that, look at the no before you go. Okay, so if you're good, I'm good. Um, See you next week. Again, good luck on your PSAT test tomorrow. Do remember to be on time. Be early. Not just on time, be early. Why did it not? Again, if you've already submitted your worksheet, you are free to go. See you next time. Bye. Okay, bye, y'all.